Okay, I think it's working. I think it is. In theory, it is. So let's press some buttons and make some stuff happen.
And now we'll see how good you are.
Do you mind telling me what this is all about, mister?
He'll teach you everything. What the
Language and writing were made available.
No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
Fight the Empire!
So anything that you could do to help would be very helpful.
All right, so here we are doing the thing. I think we're doing the thing. It seems to be that we're doing the thing. So that's net positive. Yay, so far so good. It sounds good. Let me know if it sounds good. I have no idea. I have no idea how many people are watching this, if anybody's watching this. I didn't turn those functions on. I just did the bare minimum because otherwise I was going to chicken out and talk myself out of doing this. And here we are again. So, ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, planners, potsers. Potsers? That's not the word I wanted. Plotters and pantsers was supposed to be the way that came out. Nacho cheese enthusiasts, dancers, anybody who's recently had a shower or a bath, anybody who's thought about it, anybody who's recently climbed into bed or climbed out of bed, anybody who's had a cup of coffee in the last 12 hours, people who really appreciate butterflies, and most importantly, the comrades. We're back. I'm back. I'm here. We're here. We're streaming-ish, kind of, sort of, nervously. This is, of course, the Writer's Chat. And it is October the 17th at the day and time I'm recording this. So that's nice. Hi, I'm John. How have you been? It's been a while. I know. Lots of things have changed. Lots of things, including and not limited to. I'm back on Twitch, and we're doing a whole new setup with a whole new system and all these things. And new buttons and knobs and dials. There will be new music. That's on my list of things to work on this weekend. Yeah. Oodles of good stuff, but some stuff has stayed the same. Some stuff stayed the same, including what this is, which is the Writer's Chat, where I get to answer 13 questions asked by writers of all different kinds, flavors, persuasions, identities, and genre, hopefully giving you the tools you need to write better. And it's nice to start with a Writer's Chat as opposed to like a big-ass lesson about things because, well, I want to get back to where we started, and we started with Writer's Chats, and here we are. So first, some plugs. I don't know if you know this. Maybe you do know this. Maybe you don't know this. There's a podcast. There's a podcast version of this. There's a podcast where every day, or at least 4 days a week, I answer questions and talk about writing things, all different kinds of writing things. I'm going to be continuing to talk about writing things and a lot more writing things. That's available wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for John Helps You Write Better. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, it's on Google, it's on Amazon, it's on, you name it, you can find it somewhere. Also, in addition to that, there's the Patreon, where for as low as $2 a month, you can get bonus writing help every week. We watch a movie, we talk about it, we take it apart, we talk about the characters and the plot and the pacing and the structure and the theme and how it works and when it does work and when it doesn't work, all to give you a very practical, very hands-on sense about what makes a story go and what makes a story fall apart and what you can take away from it and kind of plug into your own stuff. That's Watch Movies, Write Better. Just head over to patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better. $2 a month. I think you're going to find it really, really helpful, super, super useful. Now, no more plugs. We're done. Here we go. The writer's chat. Let's do it. Let's answer that first question. Here we go. Man, so far so good. Question number 1. How do I sort out good advice from bad advice on social media? Okay. It's tricky because the idea of good and bad are really subjective. If, let's say, you're an idiot who's absolutely clueless about things, you might grab the first advice from the most successful person and say, well, they make the most money, so this must be good advice, only to discover that they, in fact, make the most money because it's a grift or because they're, trying to sell you something rather than answer your question. And that would not be good advice. Bad advice is also not only the advice that is harmful, but arguably bad advice is the advice that eats up time and space and doesn't apply to you. I want you to kind of get away from the good-bad binary. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't matter. It doesn't work. It's not something you want to put time and energy into. What I want you to think about when it comes to advice is, what is the piece of advice, and can I apply it to what I'm doing or what I want to do or where I'm going or what's planned? Can I turn this thing, whatever it is, the sentence, the idea, the tweet, the Substack newsletter, whatever, can I turn it into something actionable? Now, that's going to require maybe some translation on your part. You're going to have to stop and think about what the person's saying, because maybe their advice isn't like step 1, step 2, step 3, do it this way. Maybe their advice is more abstract. That's fine. You're just going to have to figure that out as you go. But good advice and bad advice is going to lead you down a slippery slope of constantly judging the source more than the use, because you can get really good help from a really crap source, even if it's just an example of what not to do. So look for how actionable, look for how practical that advice is. So when it comes to applying it to yourself, you are aware of how to do it, you are encouraged in how to do it, and it seems clear that you could do it. It's not this abstract, like one day, if you just believe super hard, but change nothing and do nothing, one day it'll just magically synchronize for you. That's not how this works. That's never how this is going to work. You're always going to have to do something. So look for the actionable advice. Look for the advice that applies to you. Look for the advice that you feel you can at least give, a shot at trying. Maybe it'll work. You won't know until you try. Don't, prejudge it so far and so much in advance that you don't give it a shot, because ultimately at the end of the day, this comes down to, what can I do to write better? What can I do to write what I want and say what I want and get that all sort of across and organized? So don't fall into that social media trap of good and bad. It's not going to get you where you want to go. Look for actionable. Look for what you can do. It's always going to be better, and it's going to get you away from a lot of useless chatter. On we go. Question 2. What if my story changes genre while I'm writing it? Initially, when I got this question, I was really irritated by it, because this is the thing that comes up usually with newer writers or really undisciplined writers who are all enthusiasm and no activity. They want to talk about writing. They want to sit in writing spaces. They want to tell you how great their idea is. But when you ask them, have the words hit the page? No, they have not, or they have not to some degree because of excuses or reasons or whatever. So they ask a question like this: what happens if my story changes genre while I'm writing it? And they ask it in advance of writing, as if they need to know the answers to everything before they start, and somehow that's going to make things easier, better, more successful, whatever. First of all, it's not. The best way to figure out what you're doing is to do it. You cannot map the whole thing out first and then just kind of hope for it in the end. This is not a case where we clear the fog of war and then we win the video game. You're going to have to learn as you go. And if your story changes genre as you go, well, then I guess it changes genre. Now, Part of that might be intentional. You want to change genre because that's how you've outlined it and that's how you've written it. And yeah, you want to start doing one thing and it's going to finish as something else because of what you've planned. But a lot of the time this question comes up, it's because there isn't a plan and you're just kind of writing to write. And somehow at some point in the future, whatever that means, you're going to sort it out. This is a discipline question then. It goes from an intentional thing to a discipline thing. If you have an outline, if you know roughly what you're going to do, this should not be a problem. You should know, I'm going to stick to my outline. I'm going to follow my plan. I'm going to, go through the story as it makes sense to do so. And then your story won't change genre. It's okay that it does sometimes, situationally. It is not universally a good idea to have your story just change genre because who gives a shit and you're just writing whatever, wherever. But yeah, if your story changes genre while you're writing it and you want it to, because that's what the outline has and that's what the story structure suggests, great. You're doing awesome. Cool. But, if your story changes genre and you didn't really think about it because you weren't sure what you were going to have as the genre in the first place and you were just sitting down and writing and whatever it is, man, is whatever it is because it's just a first draft and I'm not serious about it yet and who knows. Get serious about it. Give yourself a chance to succeed at it. Take this seriously and do better than just kind of make it up as you go. You're not a child playing on the carpet with toys. This is supposed to be something you're trying to broadcast and share out with the world. So let's give it some structure. Let's back it up. Let's do some hard work and figure things out. It doesn't take very much to sort out and figure out how to do an outline. Just organize your story and make some decisions. You don't have to have sort of like this, oops, I didn't realize I changed genre. No, you're in charge of this. Make some decisions. Writing is the act of making decisions. Make some decisions. It won't change genre if you stay disciplined and organized. There you go. On we go. Question 3. Doing great. What is the worst way to start a new scene? Okay. Arguably, it depends on what kind of scene it is. Like if you're in a dialogue scene and you've got multiple people talking, the worst way to have a dialogue scene is to be unclear about what kind of talking is going on. Like, is character A talking before character B? And then what about C? And who's who? And who's saying what, when, where? So that's at least keeping it in the idea that the scene type stays the same. It's hard to be universal with this answer. It's hard to say the worst way no matter what is to always do X, because every scene's different, right? Dialogue scenes vary from one to the other. Action beats vary from one to the other. Discovery, investigation, all that stuff varies from one thing to the next. So it isn't, I don't think you're asking this question, what's the worst way to do each kind of beat? We can certainly do it that way. The worst way to start a dialogue beat is real loose and unstructured in terms of who's speaking and about what they're talking. The worst way to do an action beat is to have nothing happen. The worst way to do a discovery beat is to not really have anything found. And the worst way to have an emotional beat is to express no feelings or have no internals. But that's, I think, not what the question is asking. I think what this question is asking is, how do I start a scene so that it's not bad? And the distinction we need to make is, if this is a first scene, like if this is scene 1, then we need to open that scene and start it off by making sure the reader is engaged to some degree enough to get us to scene 2. One of the problems you get in opening things is people put a lot of pressure on your opening, and there's already plenty of pressure on it. You don't need to add more. That's kind of a lot. You don't have to do that. But the idea of I need a strong opening so that people keep watching or reading, that's a bit much. Slow down. You just need to get them to the next page, get them to the next scene, get them to the next chapter, keep them moving just a few steps ahead of where they're at. And if every scene works to do that, eventually they will read the story, see the movie, do whatever. So the worst way to open your first scene is by taking too long to be engaging. Now, some people interpret that to mean I have to make sure I say a thing so that everybody knows there's action. I have to start in media res. I have to start in the middle of something. Or I have to start with some profound opening sentence it was a dark and stormy night, or call me Ishmael. or let me tell you something about this a Spaniard named Vasquez. And that's fine. Like, that's okay. But you don't have to try so hard. You just can't take too long to be engaging in any scene. So our opening scene needs to engage enough to get us forward a little bit. Second scene, third scene, fifth scene, 20th scene down the road need two jobs. One, continue that engagement. Keep being interesting. And two, the story needs to advance. Now, when I say that, watch out. I'm not saying that scenes only need to be plot-based. And I'm not saying that the story needs to just race from plot point to plot point. That is that's an inarticulate way of laying this out, because some scenes will carry plot. Some scenes will carry character. Some scenes will carry subplot. That's just how scenes are. We should probably talk more. I think the next sort of lessons stream will be scene needs and scene building. Let's put that on the list, actually. So your scenes second onward, until we at least get to climax. Second up to climax, need to continue to be engaging and add some material to the reader's imagination. Learn some plot, develop the world, develop some characters, move some plots forward, move some arcs forward, something. Got to do something. Can't just move laterally, can't just repeat the same thing we already got. Got to do something. Doesn't necessarily have to only be the main plot, but it's got to be something. One of the exercises I would really recommend here is when you're reading a book, any book, I don't care if it's an audiobook. I don't care what it is, as long as it's fiction. Take it apart. Go grab a chapter of a book, write out the scenes. Scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. Just number them and identify what they are. Okay, in this scene, the character wakes up and checks their voicemail. The character goes to the store. The character does this. The character argues with them. And just identify what happens in the scene. Not paragraphs, not pages, scenes. And try and be as roadmap making, cartographic as you can. And then pay attention to how those scenes start. Is it always, somebody walks into an office, somebody walks into a room, somebody starts saying a sentence. Find how those things start, because that's a pretty good indicator of how things can start. But the question specifically was about the worst way. And the worst way is just taking too long but accomplishing nothing along the way. So that doesn't mean race. That doesn't mean it only has to be just the limited, desperate thing it needs to be to work. But taking too long before something happens is the problem. That's what you want to avoid. That's what you want to manage and handle. And yeah, so apparently there's an ad break coming. I am going to record through it. I know that's apparently really bad form, but I didn't adjust ads when I plugged back in, so put that on the list for things to manage in subsequent streams. But we'll get there. Let me press this button and see what happens if I snooze it. Okay, ads are snoozed 5 minutes. Sure, that's a thing I couldn't do before. Cool. We'll cross the bridge when we get to it. On we go to the next question, though. What should a writer do to evoke emotional backlash? I have to tell you, I didn't entirely understand this question when it came to me, and I did not ask enough follow-up questions. So you're going to watch me or hear me kind of work my way through this question as we go. I think they mean by emotional backlash is how they, because I see backlash and I think negative. I think like problem. I think what you mean is an emotional response. So I read a thing and then I feel a certain way about it. I think that's what you mean. How do you evoke that? A couple different things you can do. One, it's going to be in the clarity of your language. Now, I don't mean brevity. I don't mean saying the thing in the fewest number of words. I don't mean saying the thing in some kind of like haiku or riddle you have to decode or anything like that. Also, you don't want to be florid. You don't want to like go the other way and draw this elaborate, 40-word metaphor out that kind of obfuscates and misleads your point off on some tangent. Emotional response comes from clarity in language, being able to have the reader understand, oh, that's what this thing, this sentence, this page, this chapter, this word is saying. knowing that that word, that sentence, that page, that whatever, because of what it is, isn't going to necessarily hit one emotion in everybody to the same degree. So like you're writing, let's say, a sad scene where the couple in your romance novel breaks up. You can't guarantee that every reader reads that thing and then the breakup resonates with them and the sense of loss and heartbreak hits them and hits them to the exact same degree from that reader to that reader to the next reader and so on. You have no guarantee over that. It's not even possible to chart that kind of thing. But what you can do from a writing perspective while you're crafting and shaping the story is to sit there and think, well, here's the range. I know I'm aiming for heartbreak. I know I'm aiming for enthusiasm, excitement, arousal, interest, curiosity, something. I know I've got this feeling I want to get to. You can't guarantee the degree, but I can give you a range. You should be more or less this much. I'm making wide accordion hands. You should be some degree of curious, some degree of fill in the blank, whatever emotion it is. You can encourage a greater degree of that emotion based on how you write the thing down, the sentence you choose, the words you sit with, and that comes down to you picking words. Okay, I need to make the reader feel curious. I need the reader to feel scared. I need the reader to feel fill in the blank whenever they read this thing. What words can I use to get there? What words can I use to choose these things? That's what matters. That's the point. That's the idea. Your emotional response from your reader is a range rather than a specific single target. Also, keeping it as a range is going to reduce the frustration or the fear or the doubt that your reader isn't connecting with it. It's not a bullseye we have to reach. We just got to hit the target somewhere. And keeping it as a range gives you more flexibility in how you write it down. What words are scariest? What words make somebody feel curious? What words, and it comes down to first knowing the emotion. I want to get emotion X, so what words make me feel emotion X? Because if they make you feel them, or if you're, emotionally constipated in some way, shape, or form, go solicit feedback from other people, see what words and ideas, you get from them, and then try writing the scene around or including some of that language. Beyond that, you just have to kind of toss it out there and see what happens. Sporting metaphor, it's a free throw. You can master the technique up to some point, but at some point the ball is in the air heading to the hoop. Backlash, I'm not crazy about the word. It just seems confrontational. It doesn't need to be that confrontational. So instead, how about we just go with response? And remember that you can't guarantee it. You can encourage it. You can affect it. The degree at which you do comes from the language and the way you write it and how many words you put to it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily guarantee it'll happen. Nor should you sit down and think about making it happen, because some readers don't engage that way. You can write a mystery and not everybody's going to be curious. They just want to know how the story ends. They're intellectually intrigued as opposed to emotionally invested. And that's not your fault. You didn't fail as a writer or a creative if not every reader suddenly taps into some profound wellspring of emotional strength just because of your book. It doesn't work that way. What the reader does is out of the writer's hands. Like, they bought the book. Your investment in them, it's kind of done until you start worrying about the next book and getting them back on getting them engaged for a sequel and that kind of thing. But what they do with the book once they paid for it, that's not for you. I'm being told that there is an ad in 45 seconds. So during this ad break, I will take a deep breath, have a mouthful of water, and then we'll figure some stuff out. And we'll go on to the fifth question. I wish there was a way to functionally pause the stream, but I guess that defeats the purpose of the ads. I think if I had an audience, I know I'm rambling, but whatever, there's an ad break soon. I think if I had an audience, I would occupy chat during an ad break and then come back and resume questions. I don't know. I would love to figure that out. I'll put that on the list. We'll figure that out next. But let's do question 5. Why are flashbacks so frequently used despite being often boring? flashbacks aren't necessarily boring by default. Like that's not how that works. Badly written flashbacks can be boring. Badly written flashbacks, you might as well go outside and watch the grass grow. But flashbacks are used so frequently because they're a really easy way of giving the reader information that they didn't have before while not interrupting the current flow of story. So you and I are talking right now. We're on question 5. But I could easily give you a flashback about what happened an hour ago. I was on the phone with a client. We were talking about a totally unrelated thing to these questions. What was I doing 2 hours before that? I was, having breakfast. What was I doing before that? I was, just kind of make my to-do list for the day. Before that, I was asleep. Like, the flashback allows me to pause the forward momentum of what's going on to give you more clarity on the back end. Is that necessarily bad? No, not really. It's useful maybe, but how I choose to do it, just like we talked about word choice earlier with emotions and flash and what was the word they wanted to use? Backlash. And then even before that, good advice from bad advice. It's the language you're crafting and the thing you're shaping when it comes to this stuff. If they're boring, it could be how it's written. That's the problem. Because the information it gives you might be necessary for the plot, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to hit the story. Like, knowing every last second and how it was spent does not matter. Like, we're not trying to 100% a video game and get the platinum trophy. You don't need to, answer every little thing. Well, what happened? When did they exhale? When did the breeze blow in the trees? Like, nobody thinks that. You don't need to account for every frog in the swamp and every leaf blowing across the road on a cool autumn morning. Like, you just don't need to cover everything. Nor does everything need a flashback in the first place, because not everything needs to be filled in. Sometimes you can just handwave stuff. We assume that a character reached, sat in traffic, found a parking space, took a cab, took the bus, took a train, reached their destination for the start of the scene. We don't need a paragraph about them fumbling in their pockets for coins to feed the parking meter. You just don't need to do that. They're used, though, because people haven't necessarily figured out a better way to relay information. Part of that's an organizational issue. They didn't think enough about what the story is. So that, again, we're not entirely making it up on the fly the way we were before with some scenes or, some setup stuff. But it's either over puppeteering, we're micromanaging, or we are kind of hoping and praying we can stitch these things that are adjacent to each other. We can stitch them together more effectively if I just tell you more stuff. And here's the really important point that is sort of bigger than just flashback structure in general. You get to pick and choose what things you tell the reader, and you get to pick and choose what things you tell the reader to what degree you tell them. So me telling you that, a few minutes ago or an hour ago I was on the phone, or an hour before that I was in the kitchen, or an hour before that I was at the desk and I was trying to get the audio to work. Those details are nice, and they give you one more thing to imagine, but at the time I'm telling you this, I'm answering a question. Like, it is better, and one of the decision factors you need to think about when you're writing, is it better to keep the reader in the present moment and have them see the thing happening? Or, in your head, is it more important to stop, pause, hold the present moment, and then go back and fill in something? A lot of the time, there's a concern that if I don't go back and fill it in, if I don't explain to you how the stream came together, then answering the question about flashbacks somehow isn't going to make sense, or it's not going to be good enough, or that somebody somewhere is curious. As a writer, you're going to have to let them be curious. This isn't a test where it's not like a math class where you have to show your work in order to get full credit for your test paper or your question or whatever. The teacher is not coming around going, hey, how come you didn't do the division or the math or whatever? Like, that's not a thing. You don't have to justify to the reader. The reader isn't grading you. The reader isn't competing with you. You're not in a fight with them. You don't have to prove that you've mapped all these things out. Like, that's just an ego stroke or ego insulation. Readers don't care. Readers don't, worry about the parking space the main character got. Like, they figured they just went to work. They're done because the flashback is done because it's easy. It's an easy solution to a thing that is often not a problem, and flashbacks make it a problem. Or the flashback is boring because it's poorly crafted, and it's trying to answer a thing that no one's asking, so you're just sort of left with this excess material. Flashbacks can be useful. They can be really pivotal. They can be really engaging. They're great in some mystery constructions where we explain how the killer did the thing. Like, that matters. But when you find them boring, chances are it's because they're either answering a question nobody's asking, or they're crafted in a way that makes it not engaging, and we should have just stayed in the present moment. It's a good question. It's a very good question. On we go. Question 6. How early in a manuscript should I have the theme show up? Yes, it should show up somewhere. There isn't a magic place. It's not like this has to be by page 5. Like, it would be nice depending on the story. Like, you want your theme present. You don't want to just have it show up, right before the climax or after the climax, right before we resolve everything. You want your theme to be somewhere. But where that specific somewhere is entirely up to you. You could put it on the first page. If your story is real short, like real short, under 40,000 words, you probably want it earlier, way earlier. But that doesn't mean force it. That doesn't mean, like, put it in the first sentence. Some people can. You totally can. It works in some constructions. It works depending on what the theme is, and the writer knows how to, like, express it. That's fine. It just needs to be there. Earlier can be better than later. Let's spin this around. Let's answer it backwards. Is later better? No. The later a theme shows up, either the less critical it is to the story, like it was hard to shoehorn it in, or it becomes less of a big deal overall because, well, we're just finding out about it now. Earlier is good, but there isn't a magic better early than a worse early. You're not worse off for having it on page 5 and not page 7 or not page 22 or not chapter 6. It just needs to make an appearance as the story is developing, and then as the story continues, it shows back up again, and it builds, and ideally, depending on your construction, it's going to also tie to your conflict, your climax, and then get paid off in your resolution. The theme is one of those sort of, like, architectural things in story that helps tie big pieces together and hold big chunks of story together. That's why theme matters. It isn't just this thing that publishing decided one day was important and you got to put it in there. That would be comps, by the way. But themes matter because they help hold your story together. They help weave your pieces together. They help, hide your seams and create joints and welding. I'm trying to make a construction metaphor. I don't know enough about construction to do that. But you want your theme to be present early. And I leave early the specifics of it up to you. On we go. Question 7. How do I know when I've cut too much out of a scene? Okay, great question. Love a revising question. Too much is out of a scene when the scene feels very empty. Like, there's not a lot of description. It depends on what we're cutting. Are you cutting description? Are you cutting dialogue? Are you cutting internal development? Are we just cutting excess words, like you don't need that many that's or that many hads? Because if it's just simple, like, copy edits, put a comma, take a comma, split that run-on sentence into multiple sentences, that's different. That is a different way to quantify how much, I'm making air quotes, how much comes out of a scene. That's fine. Too much on that level makes the scene difficult to parse. Like, the sentences seem very choppy. The thoughts don't seem to flow from one to the next. It just seems like you have these disjointed things that happen to be arranged on the page in a certain way. If we're talking story material, like, I got to cut this whole subplot about, making a sandwich or something. When you cut substantial elements of story out and you sort of leave the hole behind, and then you try to, just delete, smash the hole shut, you can end up with the scene feeling empty and pointless, because really that scene about the sandwich was just the subplot to talk about, building and growing things. And with that gone, the scene doesn't really have a function. Your barometer there for what's too much is when you take the functionality out. The barometer for what warrants a scene staying in is that scene advancing something about my character arc? Is this scene advancing something about a subplot? Is this scene advancing my theme? Is this scene advancing my main plot? Those questions just come in any order. But if the scene is not doing one of those things, not only plot, not only character, but if it's not doing something, what is that scene here for? Could be a flashback, could be dialogue, could be an action beat, could be whatever. But if it's not advancing things and moving stuff forward, doesn't really need to be there. And when you trim content, material, mass out of a scene, and you're no longer clearly able to say what the scene is doing to those four agendas, that's when you've cut too much out. Chances are, if you've cut that much out, cut the whole thing. It's always better to, if we cut, I'm going to make percentages up, please don't hold me to these percentages. If you cut 40% out of a scene, and it was the 40% that specifically spoke to theme, and the rest of the scene still makes sense, stuff happens, but it no longer feels like a big deal, it no longer matters as much because we cut the critical stuff out, cut the scene. Just cut it. You don't need it. Look for how it addresses those four elements. Does it advance my plot? Does it advance my character arc? Does it advance a subplot? Does it advance my theme? Any scene that doesn't do one or more of those four things has to go. If a scene only does plot, it gets a little gold star by it because, well, not a gold star, not a positive, but it gets certainly looked at later as being something you want to develop with an appropriate amount of space. Don't rush through it. Don't fly by it. Don't make it, don't hastily scribble out only the critical stuff. But by and large, if a scene's not advancing some kind of story structure, story agenda, the scene doesn't need to be there. On we go. Question 8. What do I need to know about describing a cat? Okay, we need some context for this question, because when I got this question initially, people in Discord, because that's where this question came from, were being cute. They wanted me to talk about my cat because, my cat is a black cat, and it's spooky season, and what a terrible term. I don't care. I don't like Halloween. I'm not going to suddenly like Halloween. And the fact that my cat is black is nice, but not great. It's whatever. My cat's this color. Cool. And then I thought about the question some more, because it sounds like a goofy question. It sounds like just kind of a throwaway, it's funny, it's silly, it's a moment of levity. It can be. Yeah, my cat's that big. She's small. She's annoying. She's a cat. Done. But there's a great depth to this question, because when we start taking it apart, we really start seeing a lot of different ways to describe and relay information. Because to describe something is to impart information to someone who does not necessarily have the picture, and they're counting on you to put that picture in their head. So let's start doing this. Let's start taking it apart. Let's really challenge this idea. If I just say, my cat is over there on the chair, what I'm looking for and what I'm dealing with and what I'm saying is cat and chair are two concepts I am trusting you to park your own definitions for. I say cat and you picture whatever you picture for a cat. I say chair and you picture whatever you say for a chair. I don't provide you any additional detail. I am entirely trusting you to define those terms and sort that stuff out. That's fine. But, and will I have described the cat? It's a black cat. Great. Done. Straightforward. I've done the barest minimum in relaying this information. But wait, what if I didn't want to leave all the heavy lifting of thinking about a cat, thinking about a chair, thinking about the cat's color? What if I wanted to take some of that off your plate and do my job as a creative and say more about those things so that you had a clearer picture that was more in line with the picture in my head? Because again, every sentence is a camera and every sentence is an opportunity for me to broadcast information. So now instead of just saying it's a cat on a chair, I can turn this around. I can amplify some things. I can crank the volume up and go, it's a small black cat curled up on an old office chair. It's an old black office. Here, we'll go one step further. It's an old black office chair, and she's a black cat, and she very easily blends into it. The reason she's sitting in it is because she's sitting in a sunbeam, and she's warm, and she's very happy there. She'll be there for at least another hour. Now, granted, would I write better sentences to relay that information? Absolutely. I'm nervous. I'm talking into a microphone. But by and large, the control I have over relaying that information to you takes some of the burden for understanding it off your plate. Because now instead of me saying, yeah, my cat's over there, and I just kind of point my thumb backwards behind me because that's where the cat is, you're left to do all that heavy lifting and decoding and sort of guessing, like, what does John's office look like? Where is the room? Where is the sun? You have to fill in all those gaps. And as I step in and say more about each individual thing, you have less heavy lifting to do. And instead of making stuff up and guessing, the more information I can give in some kind of organized way, the clearer I am sort of mirroring the image in my head to get it into yours. Because as a writer, what you're trying to do is, communicate as close as you can, because it can't be 100%, but as close as you can, get the information out of your head into somebody else's head. See it the way I want you to see it. See it this way. You can't cover every single inch of everything. It's not going to be 100% perfect transmission. You must know that going in. That's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you're a bad writer. It's because if you've ever played the game telephone, even when you intentionally try your best to maintain it, somewhere along the way, it gets lost a little bit. And that's fine. You have to account for that. So when you're describing the cat, the chair, the sunbeam, your feeling, your nerve, your exposition, your whatever, you're just trying to relay some amount of stuff, words, descriptions, emotion, feeling, intent, whatever, so that the reader doesn't have to guess. We can leave the reader to guess sometimes. Sure, totally, sometimes. But you don't want them guessing so much that you're functionally not telling a story or relaying information. You're just sort of giving them a prompt and walking away like a game show. When you're making your descriptive sentences, when you're crafting what it is you want to say, picture this, see this, understand this, you need to have in your head or in your notes or wherever it is you store your data, you need to have a clear sense of what you're trying to relay. If you're unclear because you haven't made decisions, or you're unclear because you haven't sat down and poked things with a stick and really been like, well, the character's just, I don't know. Let me do a broad fiction example. The character is just they're in a bedroom. They're in a bedroom. And it's the start of a day. Really real broad. If I don't relay anything else, where are they standing? Are they in bed? What, is it morning, night, whatever? I'm not really doing a great job at making my story sound interesting, am I? And the whole point was to engage the reader, not just inform them. I think one of the big distinctions for a lot of people in fiction spaces is they confuse the idea of informing as engaging. Because information is just is. I don't know how else to put it. It's just statements. There's this, X, Y, Z, bedroom, desk, chair, cat, chicken, water, whatever. But the reader is always looking for context. The reader is always looking for relationship between these statements, these ideas, these proposed things, and what they're supposed to do with it. So you get into a situation where, okay, I'm just going to list nouns at you. Do something with it. Your job is to do that something for them, to help them do it themselves. And if we're trying to broadcast an idea from you to them, you have to do the work, which means you need to make the decision, which means you need to organize the decision before you even roll it out. So it isn't enough to say, well, they're just in a bedroom. It's no big deal. It's supposed to be a big deal. So in this question about, well, how would I describe a cat? You want to sit there and you don't need to like count every individual hair and whisker. You don't need like the measurements or the weight or like the genetic code or anything ridiculous like that. You need to be able to relay that information with a purpose. I want to craft a paragraph that feels soothing because in 3 paragraphs, things are about to get wild. So I want to be soothing so I can describe this cat in, basking in the sunbeam, asleep on the chair, snoring away in the background, because it creates a soothing context. And then we move on to the next idea, and so on and so forth. It doesn't really matter in what order we give the details. The cat has a tail. The cat has 4 feet. What matters is that whatever details I give in whatever order, they're doing something other than just existing. Because again, like we talked about earlier, this isn't a matter of just like, hey, I have to 100% this video game, so I got to give you all the facts and just say what it is. Purpose, context, 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 context. If you're going to say a thing, do something with it. It makes a substantial difference. On we go. And somebody's here. Hi. Yes, I'm back in chat. Hello. Pressing the button. Question number 9. How would I write a ghost story? What do I need to know? Well, first of all, you need to know that your question's real vague. Like real vague, because do you know how many kinds of ghost stories there are? There's like tons of ghost stories. There's, revenge ghost stories, moral ghost stories, gothic ghost stories, horror ghost stories, familial legend, myth, morality tale, fairy tale. Loads of different kinds of stories with ghosts. And just because it has a ghost in it, arguably it becomes a ghost story. So my question to you, my counter question, we'll call it that, is what's the function of the ghost? Is it the obstacle? Is it the thing to overcome? Is it the antagonist? Is it the challenge? Is it the protagonist? Is it, just a thing that exists in the background like my laundry basket next to my bathroom? Like, is it just there? When you're writing this ghost story, whatever it is, you got to make that decision early. Like, here's the kind of story I'm telling. And if you just default to a single emotional palette and then stop, you're going to make it harder for yourself. If you just go, I want to write a scary ghost story. Great. I would like a burrito. I would like I would like to just sit back and have someone hand me hundreds of dollars of bills, Like, that's great. It's good to want things. What kind of ghost story are we saying? What kind of function in the story does the ghost serve? Where is the ghost in relation to our main character if our ghost is not the main character? What are we trying to do to the reader? Yeah, scare them. I got it. That's great. How? We want them to feel what? Why? We want to scare them because the ghost jumps out and goes, ooh, and then scares you at the scary part of the book, like it's the climax of the story. So that sounds like the ghost is the bad guy. You can't, well, no, we'll be clear. You shouldn't just blandly dive into it because it's not simple. Like the cat question. Sounds simple. You could give a blow-off answer. It's a cat. You just say cat words and then you're done. Oh, it's a ghost story. You just say ghost things and then you're done. Any story is an opportunity to lens a frame and lens a point of view and broadcast an idea and say something. It doesn't have to be like the ghost is a metaphor for, 1920s labor relations. You don't need to get like crazy academic deep. You don't need to like constantly sit in the like, it's a socio-political metaphor. It can just be a ghost. That's fine. Not everything needs to be like decodering levels of complex. But every thing, every element has the potential to be something more than its surface. It's a ghost. Ooh, okay. Scooby-Doo ghost, or poltergeist ghost, or weird CG haunty ghost. Like, everything has the potential to be more than just the base definition of itself. So when you're picking and choosing the words you want to use, pick them in accordance with the decision you want to make. Pick them in accordance with the idea you want to have. What do you need to know? Well, you need to know what function the ghost serves in the story. You need to figure out what kind of story you're telling, not necessarily in this order. You need to figure out if the end emotional state of your reader is significantly different than the starting emotional state of your reader. Like if you're going to scare them, they need to be more scared at the end than they are at the beginning. Just because that's how emotional weight works. Like it has to hang with you. But the function of a ghost story is to do something to the reader, affect them in some way. Find those things and then work out what function the ghost serves. Because, for instance, here, we'll compare some things. The very scary haunted house story of, oh my God, I live now in a haunted house, ooh, is very, very different than the ghost story that is A Christmas Carol, where Scrooge is visited by 3 ghosts. That's a ghost story because it has ghosts in it. But it's not the same as the, scary Halloween story where the ghost comes out, and like the bride ghost comes out and lures unfaithful men and then, kills them in their car and they get found the next morning. Like, that's also a ghost story. Totally different. You're not going to see, the ghost of Christmas Present show up and murder people dressed as a bride. That would be weird but interesting. But it's not the same because ghost stories aren't the same. Just like murder mysteries and westerns and sci-fi and fantasy and news stories. They're not all the same. Figure out what the ghost does. Figure out what you're trying to do. And then build from there. On we go. Next. Question 10. Is more procrastinating worse than less procrastinating? I really like this question. I really, really like this question. Because I talk to a lot of people who procrastinate. I am somebody who procrastinates. And one of the ways I justify my procrastination is to sit down and talk about how much it is. Well, I need to, for instance, after this, I need to record something pretty lengthy. And I've been putting it off. I could have done it yesterday. I didn't because I got busy doing other things and I could have made time, but I didn't. And I told myself, well, it's just a little procrastination. Whatever, I'll do it today. I'll do it Thursday. It's not that big a deal. And that makes it better. But I could have had it done yesterday. I could have had it done yesterday and then had the whole day once I was done here to just do whatever the hell I wanted because I didn't have any other responsibilities until, writing group tonight. So less procrastinating, according to me, is better than more procrastinating and making more procrastinating worse. But procrastination is procrastination. Putting something off is putting something off. The amount of time doesn't make it better or worse. It can help you rationalize it. It can help you feel more comfortable about it. But yeah, it can be good. Let's be clear. There can be value to it because it'll give you a chance to, get your head straight about a thing, clear your head, handle other stuff. Like I didn't stream for so long. Why? Because I was working on books and I was, talking to people and I was doing editing and I was doing this and I was doing that. And I was doing a ton of other stuff. So it fell by the wayside. And after a while, it became an issue of like, it'll be awkward if I go back, right? And for a while it was, and then I would make excuses like, well, I used to be on a Mac and that wasn't great for streaming. And one day when I get the PC, then I'll go back. And then I got the PC and I'm going back. And now it's infinitely more complicated and I want to procrastinate more. Well, I had to reinstall this and set this up, and I want to, eventually get to a point where I'm separating all the audio channels with this thing and this thing. And like, that's really complicated and kind of scary because I wanted to get it to work right. And I don't think I can because reason and excuse, et cetera, et cetera. So more procrastinating happens. That's not good. That's not better. Procrastination can be good in that it'll give me a chance to like watch one more tutorial, ask one more person to tell me that I'm doing a great job. Hopefully get words of encouragement from a person who I really want to have encourage me. It'll be great. But instead of evaluating it and saying some degree of procrastination is acceptable, period, I think it's got to be way more contextual. I think it's got to be way more like situational. Super long bouts of procrastination, they're okay. They happen. Life happens. People need breaks. They get busy with work. They lose their jobs. They move. They have kids. They do this. They do that. They do a ton of stuff. So some of it matters, but at the same time, to evaluate it on the basis of quantity and say there's an acceptable quota limit, I think that just ties people's hands and creates more frustration than success. Yeah. I really like how chewy that question got. Really nice. All right. So apparently there's an ad break happening right now. I'm not quite sure how long this ad break is, but I will take this moment to ask however many people in chat. Again, no idea how many of you there are. Do you guys in chat have any questions? Here, you can have a question slide. You're glad I'm back. Yeah, I am too. Like it feels kind of awkward. It feels a little messy and disjointed, and like I'm trying to remember what to do with my hands. I don't know how else to describe that. But I'm glad to be here. Like, okay, it's gonna get better from here. Like, this is a nice baseline, but like I'm not dropping any frames, and I've dropped a little, not many, but like. It's been pretty good. It's been stable. I'm pretty sure the video and audio sound good. So I at least got some of the hard part figured out. The audio is going to be a thing, but hey, we'll get there. We'll figure it out. I'm a smart guy. I can watch enough tutorials, and if, dude bros can figure out their audio, surely I can sit down and figure out how to designate certain channels for certain things, and we can get fancy. Who knows? And if not, I'll ask somebody for help. So we'll get there. But it's good to be back. I'm looking forward to like large scale production. Like, I don't have the same software anymore. So I didn't realize how like muscle memory reliant I was on like, oh, I can just press a button on the Mac and do that. But it's better this way. I get to be more intentional about it. I get to be more organized about it. It feels a little bit more piratey and rugged and outside the norm, which I always like. I'm good. I'm better now than I was. This is I'm happy with this as we've gone for about an hour. All right, so we're back. Cool. Good ad break. Sweet deal. On we go. Let's see. That was question 10. So on we go to 11. How do you make an origin story sequel interesting? Here's what this is. You write a book. Doesn't matter what it is. You write a book, and then you decide, hey, the next book, it's going to be the origin story for how the first book started. Totally normal, totally common. By design, there should be a level of interest in that because we want to know how the hero from the first book got to be the hero in the first book. So there's a level of interest already baked in, ideally. If for some reason you're unsure if it's interesting, then you need to question whether or not the origin story needs to be given. Because again, like we talked about earlier when we were describing the cat or when we were just laying out scenes, it comes down to understanding, Do I really need to tell this story to make the overall big picture? Because remember, this is a sequel. So it isn't just filling in information inside a book. It is now contextualizing a whole book plus a new book because you're adding to the canon of things. Do I really need to tell this story? Let's do an example from television. So in an upcoming podcast episode, I'm going to tell you why NCIS Origin is not great, because it's struggling to do two things. It's trying to be an origin story, but told in a very sort of modern way, which is good. It could just be that. However, here's the problem. It's also trying to be a procedural, which is not good, because it doesn't need to be that, but it has to be, because it's on CBS. And they do procedurals, and it's a big boomer thing, and that's just how shit is. And it makes, because those two things, procedural and origin story, are not easily handled. There's a reason why in Batman and all the Batman Year One and all the early Batman stories, the crime Batman's trying to solve takes a backseat to being goddamn Batman, is because the origin story is vastly more interesting than the procedural that the origin story happens to be doing in order to develop the origin. And what you're left with NCIS Origins, at least, is an uninteresting procedural that is in the way of a possibly interesting origin story to a character we don't need the origin of. Here's the next problem with an origin sequel. Sometimes explaining how the magic trick is done, sometimes explaining the backstory of a thing weakens the thing. Knowing how the magic trick works makes it less special. You don't always have to inform everybody about everything up to that point. We didn't need to know about all the blades of grass and all the trees that got turned into lumber to build the house. We don't need to know the history of the guy who, sold you your car. It can be novel. It can be like, oh, that's nice. But without a purpose, without a function, is just extra. And NCIS Origins in particular definitely feels like a case of like, we need a new thing on TV. We can't let the NCIS thing go because it's been on for like 90 years. We have to just wring more juice out of this lemon. What are we going to do? So we're going backwards. And if we just told an origin story and we didn't care about the procedural nature of it, I think it'd be really good. But adding the procedural element, adding a thing to make it feel more like the first thing, that's the problem. That's where the origin sequel can fall apart. So one of the ways you can make your origin story sequel interesting is understanding that you have to prioritize one part over another and not try to 50-50 it, not try to straddle that fence. Because the big problem with NCIS Origins is because they're trying to split the fence because they have so many things like, oh, we have to know how we met this character, and we have to know how we met that character, and what, eventually down the road, we have to see how they connect to this character and that character because they were referenced in the first thing. And you don't have to explain everything. Leave some shit alone. Leave some things mysterious and unsaid. Another, let's use a non-CBS hour-long drama example. Let's talk Star Wars. You don't need to do everything. So the Clone Wars was one line in A New Hope. A throwaway. We didn't know anything about it. We didn't know about clones or separatists or robots or clankers or, the cartoon series or Ahsoka or anything like that. It was a throwaway sentence to establish some kind of relationship between two characters in a current story. But it became a thing. Now, clones could have been like clones of people, different people, like a Skrull story in Marvel. Doppelgangers and duplicates and tension that way. Sure, absolutely could have been. It didn't. It turned into just big war stories. Now, to be fair, the Clone Wars cartoon is excellent. It's totally worth watching. But it didn't have to be a thing. It became a good thing, but early on it's a little rough. But it didn't have to. Be careful when you are crafting an origin story sequel that you're not avoiding the sequel by trying to explain a thing that doesn't need explaining. Instead of a brand new sequel, instead of a brand new follow-up going forward, I went backwards because it's safe. The stakes are reduced. We know that we have to end where the first book starts, or at least put us on the path to get there, right? We've gone backwards. We know the character is not going to die. We know they're not going to face significant harm or loss because we know the first book that we already read is the present for that character. So we've put those bumpers on the bowling lane. We've kind of padded the rough, sharp edges. It's a safe play. And I think one of the things you need to do, and non-NCIS shows have done this in backstories, is take some of the safety away. Better Call Saul into Breaking Bad takes a lot of the protective safe edges away as you watch Jimmy McGill become Saul Goodman. And it leaves a lot open, and it tells its own story, and it acts like its own thing. And that's what the origin story should do. NCIS Origins does not do that. And that's why they are two vastly different and arguably incomparable things, where one, Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, way better. Totally chewier. Totally more narratively interesting than procedural that also happens to be like time-locked in the early 90s. Keep it interesting by making sure you are telling the thing you want to tell in the way you want to tell it without trying to overly stay true. That's the language that I like to use. Stay true to the original idea, because you just don't need to. Go do your own thing. Blaze your new trail, even though it's an origin. On we go. Question 12. If I struggle with imagination, am I going to struggle as a writer? Yeah, you are. Because there needs to be some level of imagination. There needs to be some level of creativity. There needs to be some level beyond the rigidity of statement of fact. You need to be able to make stuff up. You need to be able to guess. You need to be able to I'm going to use a broad term, dream. You don't necessarily need to like sleep and see movies while you sleep, but you need to be able to create abstract reality. If you struggle with that for any number of reasons, you will struggle as a writer trying to parse it out, because writing is the expression of imagination. Now, there are tools, there are books you can read, there are resources you can avail yourself with, there's people you can talk to who can help you, liberate some degree of imagination. If it's been withheld or constrained for any number of reasons, you can learn coping mechanisms and strategies to be more creative. But it is difficult for me to say that all struggle will be totally gone, because imagination is the fuel for writing, making stuff up, guessing, figuring it out, being able to clearly see it in your head and relay that information matters. You can do it. You can be a writer. You can even be a good writer and struggle with it. Struggle isn't necessarily like the worst. It's not like we're only supposed to do it if it's easy. But yes, if you're struggling with grappling with the language of imagination or the translation of imagination into prose, it's going to be tough to be a writer. I'm not discouraging you from it. I think you should do it anyway. But I think you should do it with some assistive devices. I think you should do it with some tools. I think you should do it with some support. Because it is the act of making decisions, but it doesn't only pertain to fact. We don't need the Wikipedia definition of everything. We don't need the backstory everywhere. You need to be able to make a story up and get engaged by it. So anytime I run into a client who's not comfortable with their imagination for whatever reason, the first thing I would usually tell them to do is you need to read stuff. Read more books, different books, lots of different kinds of books, and see what that story makes you feel. See what that story has you picture in your head, if anything. Or is writing creatively just about knowledge? Is writing creatively just about knowing a thing? Oh, I know that, the character went over here, and then they did A, and then B, and then C, and then D. Like we're crossing off a checklist.
Or are you able to see the language and have it sink into you in such a way that it feels as though you could watch it happen if it were happening in front of you? Part of that is on the writing itself, the words chosen, but part of that is also on your ability to place yourself there. If you struggle with that, if you struggle with that sort of placement of self in a holodeck visualization kind of thing, yeah, chances are very good you're going to struggle writing it, because that's what you're trying to encourage someone else to do. And it comes down to being kinder with yourself on some level, stopping and thinking about like, okay, I need to say this way. I need to talk to the reader as though they're standing in this room. I need to be not necessarily clear and stark in my language, but I need to be evocative in my language, which means I need to pick and choose the language that is the most expressing my idea, or the most expressive of my idea, as opposed to just performing the task of letting you know that in this room there is this stuff and people are doing things. Part of that comes from just practice. Part of it, though, a large part of it, though, comes from absorbing material and picking up things from other writers and trying to access something vulnerable and trying to access something emotional beyond an intellectual level. And that can be hard for a lot of people. So the short answer is, yeah, if you struggle, yeah, it'll be a struggle with the other stuff too. But I would encourage you, even if it is a struggle, to keep trying and build yourself a toolkit to reduce the amount of struggle. I can't guarantee, and I can't say it'll automatically disappear, but you can certainly reduce some of that difficulty. On we go to our very last question. Why should I even bother writing anything when the world is so messed up? I see this a lot, and I hear this a lot from people I work with. You know, there's climate and pandemic and this and that and this problem and U.S. politics and, you know, jobs and money and groceries and this, that, and the other. All that stuff's going on. I can't get it out of my head. I can't avoid it. It's everywhere. It dominates my thinking at times. What's the point of me writing and they will usually speak negatively about their work. What's the point of me writing a silly story when, like, you know, there's a pandemic going on, people don't wear masks, nobody's washing their hands anymore, and the oceans are 1.5 degrees more than they should be? What's the point? Here's the point. This is exactly the point. If you want, okay, we'll be very clear about this. I don't know if like the planet will be the planet. Like, I know it'll be a rock floating in space, but like, we're slowly cooking ourselves. We are slowly killing ourselves with all different stuff, right? Like pandemic, virus, illness, civilization collapse, air quality, all that stuff. I don't know what that's going to turn us into, if anything. I don't know if that's good or bad. We're in the middle of an extinction wave. Who knows what the fuck's going to happen? I get it. So if we are rocketing towards the end of things as we have come to know it, we will need comfort. We will need a moment to catch our breath. And that doesn't mean we're ignorant of it. That doesn't mean we're avoiding the reality of, like, all the bees and the birds are dying and people are sick and getting sicker. I'm not saying pretend it doesn't happen. I'm not saying ignore it. I'm saying that while all those bad things are happening, we need comfort. And in addition to comfort, we need to be motivated to do better, right? Because humans are resilient, humans are capable, humans are adaptable. If the world changes, we need to be able to survive in it. We can't just give up. It can be very tempting to give up. We can feel as though we are not good enough to continue. Lord knows I feel that feeling like on a minute-by-minute basis from about September 1 to like March 1st. But all the same, yeah, you got to be able to persevere. Art, creating your silly little story or whatever negative you use. I don't like that you just called it a silly little story, but your art helps. It comforts people. It comforts you. It comforts the reader. It matters. And yeah, you want to split more hairs? Fine. It's a way you can make some money in a hyper-capitalist society. Sure. If that's important, go ahead. But on a bigger picture, it's art. Art always has value. You, as an artist, always have value, both as a person and as a person who speaks up and out and against the flow of the tide that suggests that we should just throw our hands up and either fully commit to our destruction or just run around screaming panicked. Art is inspirational, aspirational. Art is motivational. Art, whatever you're writing, is a chance to elevate those people who could do more and do better and do different. They could look at you and go, because of this thing existing in this world, I can do more than just sit around and panic. Art is your voice. Art is your chance to be heard in all the screaming and panic and sky falling and birds dying and people coughing and nobody washing their hands and loneliness and emptiness of everything. Art is your chance to say that, yeah, we might be hurtling towards our end, but damn it, somebody's going to know I was here. That matters. It super matters. Because there might be somebody coming down the road next after we are all gone who sits there and goes, wow, that person was here. This left an impact. Think about the books you've read, the music you've listened to from people who are no longer alive that have made an impact on you. Art, yeah, it sucks that they're not around, but there's an impact that music or that book or those words or those feelings have to you. The world is messed up. We can blame a lot of things, a lot of systems, a lot of people, a lot of decisions for that. Art, though, can provide us a solution. Art, though, can give us comfort. Art, though, can give us relief. Art matters. The story I like to tell with this is that for a very, very long time, we used to sit, not just me, but people, humans, used to sit and stare at the night sky and say all those things, all those stars, the moon was really, really far away. So far away that they made up different stories about what they were. Gods, mythology, pinpricks of light in a curtain, projections from whatever. You know, we made up stuff because it was really far away. We couldn't have a context with it. We couldn't get it. But we made art about all different kinds of stuff, reaching for the stars, being our better selves and doing that. And eventually, because of art, because of created story, because of storytelling, because of myth and legend and history and fiction and paintings and photos and all that stuff, we found more science. Hard, concrete fact, flight, propulsion, lift, gravity, physics. And the moon, this thing that used to just be this thing we dreamed about and fantasized about and made bullshit stories up about, like it's made of cheese or whatever, or there are transformers that live on it, or it's a magic hollow moon base for aliens or whatever. All that stuff suddenly became very real because we could build a machine that would carry us there. That didn't just stem from some dude being like, I have $1 billion and I'm an asswipe, so I'm just going to be rich and make a dick-shaped rocket and do stuff. No, we went to the moon because we had art that said we could push ourselves to go reach for goals. In their world, in their time, whether it's the end of this civilization or the end of that civilization, or the collapse of this or the rise of that, people have sworn up and down forever that the world is messed up. Why should I even bother? It's because art is the thing that lifts us up and forward. Art is what got us to the moon. Art is what got us through, the bad times. Art is what moves us forward when we struggle. Art is what moves us forward when we hurt. Art heals and art comforts and art unifies. In a world falling apart where division is praised, why not do the opposite? Why not do the most punk thing possible and make art and stand up and have a voice and help the person to your left and to your right, as opposed to just being out in it for yourself? That's what art does. That's the whole point. So why should you bother? Because you want to do those things. Because you want to put more good in the world, in a world sorely deprived of it. Because you want to connect. Because you want to matter. Because you want to be here. That's why we write. Yeah, it also gives us a chance to sell things on Kindle. Sure. Go ahead. Great. Good for you. Go make $2 and not even a full $2.99. But go ahead. Sure. If that's how you want to file it, cool. But I'm telling you, the value of art and the value of being an artist is in being the best you can be and not ignoring or excising some dimension of your personality in order to accomplish some task. Because if you just want to accomplish tasks, I got to do laundry later, and I got to fold some socks, and I got to wash my sheets, and like I should probably sweep the kitchen floor. Like, if you want tasks to do, man, I got tasks. We can do tasks all day. But we have the chance to be artists. We have the chance to elevate. We have the chance to inspire and be inspired and demonstrate inspiration and demonstrate care and demonstrate love and demonstrate positive things that, you know, a performative list can't give us. So why should you bother doing it? Because it matters. Because you matter. That's why. All right. People in chat, I don't even know if you're still there. Again, I didn't put the button on the thing, so I have no idea. I'm just going to ask, does anybody have any questions? Otherwise, we will get out of here. This went better than expected. I'm quite pleased. Shall we get out of here? I must remember that there is a delay between me saying that and somebody answering. No question. Cool. Let's get out of here.
Work complete.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for, showing up, helping me do this. For more things like this, go check out the YouTube channel where there's tons of these things from way back, and there will be more coming forward. And if you want me in your ears every day, wherever you get your podcasts, go look for John Helps You Write Better. And if you want even more than that, patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better. And even if you want more than that and you want to help being creative, doing your things, writing your stories, editing your book, getting published, figuring out your marketing, figuring out how you're going to tell the story, fixing your problems, finding out what you need to do better. I really need to make that longer for next time. If you want help, head over to johnhelpsyourwritebetter.com. You can sign up for free help today, right now. I would love to help you. All right, let's get out of here. I will talk to you very, very soon. See ya.